You're listening to the For Climate Tech series on the Forward Faster podcast, providing bite-sized insights for climate tech innovators.
Hello and welcome to Forward Faster. I'm Chris Carpenter, your host, and with me today is the new Director of Venture for Climate Tech, Jenny Leung. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. Jenny has an extensive career in entrepreneurship and climate that I'm excited to dive into today. Jenny recently joined the Next Core Venture for Climate Tech team and is based in LA. Previously, she ran 5 programs at Techstars, including Techstars LA, Techstars Space, and Techstars Healthcare. She is a 2-time founder, UCLA MBA, first-generation graduate, and immigrant. She's worked for companies like Disney, Boeing, and Amazon and brings a wide breadth of experience to the team. Without further ado, let's get started. So first question for you, when did you first get exposed to entrepreneurship and running a business?
Yeah, when I look back, I think it all started when I was pretty young. My dad was a machinist by apprenticeship. And when we immigrated here to America, he set up a machining shop in a garage and took jobs to try to make more money after his full-time shift at a machine shop. So we had CNCs, lathes, milling machines, and after school and on weekends, I would help him. He mostly worked on sheet metal parts, and I just kind of fell in love with building things with my own hands. So, like as a side note, if you ever have anything from IKEA and you want help building it, I am happy to be there.
All right, I know to go.
But the business ultimately failed. There was a lot more to it than just being able to deliver great work, such as sales or marketing or financials, etc. So that's how I got curious about what it really took to run a successful business and decided that I was going to learn as much as I could whenever I could. And as a part of this, interest in learning, let's call it that, was because my parents never had the chance to go to school past elementary. And as a small tangent, so that what I say will kind of make more sense, my father's mother, so my grandma, was a brilliant and savvy woman, but she was not allowed to attend school. Girls in her generation were not allowed. And it sounds crazy, right? Because this was only 2 generations ago, and it's still happening in the world today, actually. And one of the reasons we immigrated here was because my parents had 2 daughters and thought we would have better opportunities here. So from a young age, I realized not only the importance of education, but also the privilege of having one, which is where, this theme of learning and being intellectually curious has kind of followed me throughout my years and also into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, oh my gosh, talk about a grounding perspective and a good compass. And so where did you go to school? And what did you do that kind of helped you feel ready to start your own business?
I graduated from UCLA with an econ degree, which was the closest thing UCLA had to a business major at the time. There's now an entrepreneurship minor, but that wasn't available when I was there. So instead, I minored in this thing called Human Complex Systems, which is a multidisciplinary minor looking at how the systems we create affect people. And it was really interesting and maybe kind of set the tone to a little bit of kind of my career in the future as well. But in my career, I started working at 16 and took a job in retail, then worked front desk at Hilton on the weekends. Then in college, I interned at Disney in finance and Mercer in HR consulting. I got a full-time offer after my internship at Mercer, so started working there, and the clients that I had were Fortune 500 companies. And I got to sit in with the C-suites and learn about how they thought about their benefits and how that affected their employees from both a retention and an attraction point of view. It was really beneficial because as I look back, it taught me how company culture could be affected by benefits. I was then recruited to a machine repair operations company where I was an operations manager. It was there that I realized how important operations was to a company because one piece or one person or one process can have a huge effect downstream. And I think it was here that I realized that I really enjoyed operations. It was like putting a big puzzle together. So then at some point, I ran a clothing line, which I know you'll ask me about later. I took a job at Boeing as a contracts manager, and later in my career, I had a stint at Amazon as a senior product manager. I was going to move to Spain in their office for it, but then COVID happened. So I know all of this sounds like a pretty zigzaggy career, but I was always just curious about how different parts of a company came together, even in different industries, because then I could learn firsthand what needed to be done. I could learn best practices across the board, and I could learn how to plan ahead and mitigate risks for when I started my company. And now, as the director for Venture Climate Tech, this is something that I can bring to help early stage startups as well.
Wow, yeah, that is such a zigzag of experiences, as you kind of mentioned. And I'm curious too, is when did climate really start piecing in there? So could you dive deeper as to where your journey in climate really started?
Absolutely. So I alluded to kind of having a first company, a clothing line. It was a women's contemporary line, and it had been picked up by Nordstrom's in anthropology, which is amazing. But I had to go overseas and look at different factories. And in that time, I saw with my own eyes the working conditions in some of these factories, and I was appalled. And so the more I learned about that and the more I learned about how polluting the industry was, fashion is said to be the second highest polluting industry in the world, but it seems to have taken a backseat, against a lot of other things because it's so like in your face all the time. Fashion is just there. And so people don't think about it, but accounts for like 20% of global water pollution. And they say that, if you do 5 times the maritime and airline travel combined, that's how much emissions the fashion industry puts out into the world. And so I got really upset about what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was doing it any better, right? We're just another clothing line out of a sea of other clothing lines. And when I came back from kind of that experience, I took a really big look at myself in the mirror and I said, this is not what I wanted to do. And so that's kind of where my climate journey started.
Wow. Yeah. I can't even imagine seeing it all firsthand because it's one thing to say, but it's another thing to see it.
Absolutely.
So you got back. How did you change course after that experience?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're lost in their career, they end up going to business school. So I went to business school again at the beautiful UCLA, and I was trying to look for what was next. I knew a lot about fashion at the time, but I wasn't sure if that's where I wanted to dig in again. But I did know I wanted to do something that was for the betterment of the world and for the betterment of people. And I just so happened that in that time, I found a problem that I really wanted to solve. As I said, I was in business school. I had a lot of female friends in business school and also throughout my career who were at the beginning ages of family planning. And when they were all pregnant, they would complain to me about how expensive their maternity clothes were, how it didn't fit them, or didn't portray professional, competent women. Because the things that you could find, especially in fast fashion stores, were poor quality or even see through. And the good ones were expensive, but you only need it for a couple months. I was surprised that there was not a solution for this because these women were going through so many things like morning sickness, their bodies are growing in different ways. They're dealing with the taboos about being pregnant while working and how their employees might react. There was just so much that she has to think about and plan for, and clothing should be the least of her worries. So I asked them, why can't you rent your maternity clothing? And they said that doesn't exist. So that was the birth of my second company called Bella Nove, which translates to Beautiful Nine for Beautiful 9 Months. We rented quality maternity wear for working women, and we could triple her product selection at half the cost. And I ran it for 3 years. I loved everything about it because this time it really aligned with my values. We were using circular economy, we worked with ethical manufacturers, and it was about women empowerment.
And just like that, a second company. It's cool to see how people can just pivot because so many times you hear stories of folks who take something into the end and then you just never hear from them at the end. So it's cool to see people who can rebuild after like such an experience in such like a conscious way. So what happened next?
Yeah, so I sold the company in 2019, which from a timing perspective was nice because in 2020, COVID happened. Nobody was wearing clothes. Um, and as you'll kind of hear throughout, the themes of life, that timing really does make a difference. But at this time, I was figuring out what else I wanted to do in climate. I had known a lot about fashion. I had known a lot about, circular economy, but I wanted to do more. And so I took a boot camp called Terra.do. It's TERRA.do. I was in their second cohort and we were named the orcas. They name each cohort after an endangered animal, which I thought was really cool. And I don't know what cohort they're on now, but they have definitely helped a lot of people learn more about climate in a very short amount of time. At the same time, I became an Al Gore trained climate reality leader. I also helped a nonprofit who gets political in the name of climate called Climate Change Makers. I'm just dropping all these names here. Look them up because they're great. This one, is only asking for 1 hour of your volunteer time to get political in the name of climate, and they help you through every step of the way. Um, And in those 8 months when they first started, I was there to really actually help them on the back end and building it up. And one of the co-founders at Climate Changemakers that I work closely with, his name is Cody Sims. He is now a partner at My Climate Journey, so you might know him. He was at Techstars at the time and referred me into a role at Techstars LA, and that's when I spent the next 2 years.
Wow. It's a really great way to get into climate, I think, where you just kind of take the initiative, take some classes, plug into a couple communities, and then slowly roll it into a full-time gig. So good work.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if the people are, doing the same things that you're wanting to do, like, your options seem so limitless. So,
Yeah. And to me, Techstars is just they're the big guys in the entrepreneur space. So to make your way there is not a small task. So can you talk about your time at Techstars and what you enjoyed and learned from them?
yeah, so I spent 2 years there, and as you alluded at the beginning of our conversation, I ran 5 programs. I ran 3 LA programs, which are all industry agnostic. Then I ran the Texas Space Program, which was partnered with NASA's JPL and the US Space Force, and then Texas Healthcare. So not only was I running program and, by the time of my last program, I had 5 associates and 2 simultaneous programs happening physically in LA with 24 founder teams and 4 partners. All of this was really only possible because of the ops and process that I'd put in place from previous programs, right? So, like, if we go back to kind of the theme of my career, like putting the puzzle together, all of that was setting me up for being able to do this. So I learned again, I was still really good at operations, but, as a former founder now, I also learned that I got to work with founders on their day-to-day issues, and I loved it. I loved giving back. I felt like finally there was a place for me where I can use all my experiences and skills, and make an impact through supporting these companies. It was really gratifying work, and I realized that I really wanted to stay supporting early stage startups, but I also wanted to have a focus in climate given my previous startup and how much work still needs to be done there. There's kind of a defining story here because even though I was working on some of these like industry specific programs, which was such a cool experience, when I was running the healthcare program, someone once said to me that it must be really gratifying to be working with companies who save lives. And I said, but if there's no world for the lives to be saved on, then what's the point? And I think that's when I knew I really wanted to be at the intersection of startups and climate, which is exactly what Venture for Climate Tech is.
It's cool to see your operational skills kind of push to the max at Techstars, and then us at Venture for Climate Tech get to get to take part in the reward. And they're really, I think you nailed it on the head. Like, what's the point of all this other work if there is no planet at the end of it?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I know you and I have talked about this before, but you've always had an immigrant lens and mindset when approaching a task or business. Can you expand on that and how that part of your identity impacted aspects of being an entrepreneur and a businesswoman?
Yeah. So I didn't start that first company until I had enough money saved, right? I didn't know what venture was until just, a couple years ago. I just knew that you saved money or took out a loan and then you paid back the loan, which made me really, lean and scrappy. Like I budgeted the heck out of everything, and you kind of get creative on how to get things done with less financial resources. And I guess another example is like when I was going to business school, I went to business school part time. Some companies had really great reimbursement benefits, and Boeing paid actually for most of my MBA, and I still got to go to work and get paid there. But also, those years of work, still were being counted in my resume, right? If you did full time, you kind of took 2 years off, which, if I had more resources, like would have probably done it, but I didn't. So, it was a calculated decision that I made to do all of this the way that I did. And while I ran Bellanove, I had searched for a lot of free resources. Being in business school, that actually opened me up to a lot of them, such as being in pitch competitions and winning a lot of money, in which helped me seed the company. And remember that entrepreneurship minor I told you about that UCLA now
Yeah.
has? Yeah, well, undergrads who have this minor needs to actually do a capstone project that requires them to work with a startup for school credit. So I had a lot of amazing interns for free because of this program. So again, lean and scrappy. So I guess a generalization here is that like with the mindset of kind of being an immigrant, I've always been really resourceful, or at least I looked to be resourceful, right? I always like, tried to find things. And I haven't talked much about also being a woman in startups, but there are definitely stats out there that show that a woman can stretch the dollar a lot more than their male counterparts. So maybe it's a mixture of those two things that have made me kind of work the way that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't doubt it. I know some of the stats are daunting as well. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it whenever we get the chance to highlight that. So you've gone through all of that and you've made it here at Venture for Climate Tech. And I'm curious, what are you hoping to accomplish as the new director here at Venture for Climate Tech?
Yeah. So I've had the luxury of getting to know this team a few months prior to joining full time, right? And a lot of it was because I wanted to make sure that we were a good fit for each other and that our kind of North Stars aligned. And obviously it did, which is why I'm here.
Good.
But the goals that I had that I want to accomplish really aligns with what V4C hopes to accomplish. And so, like, here's kind of what they are. First, removing gigatons of carbon emissions through the technologies of these early stage startups that we get to support. Second is to scale our impact, whether that means more programs or more startups that can come through and get value from the program and our resources. Third is to be really intentional about supporting at least 75% of each cohort to have a diverse makeup in their leadership. And fourth, like, with a team that I get to mentor and I get to develop all while having fun and really just getting shit done.
Yeah, of course. I love it. I love the list. I think we have more than enough aligned. Well, Jenny, thank you for joining us today and sharing your story. We're lucky to have you on the team and can't wait to see what you do here at Venture for Climate Tech. Thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time at Forward Faster.